In the sun-drenched rolling hills of Napa Valley, California, wealth grows on vines, and secrets are buried deep in the soil. It is a place where billionaires sip $1,000 wine and pretend their lives are perfect. But under the Californian sun, even the sweetest grapes can turn into the deadliest poison. To the local authorities and the high society press, the death of Harrison Vance, a 72-year-old wine tycoon, was a tragic but completely natural event. Harrison collapsed during his massive anniversary festival, gasping for air in the middle of his own vineyard. His beautiful 30-year-old wife, Vanessa, screamed and cried for the cameras. His private concierge physician, Dr. Thorne, pronounced him dead at the scene, citing a sudden catastrophic asthma attack triggered by the summer heat. The coroner agreed. The case was closed before sunset. But there was one person who didn't believe the narrative: Harrison's estranged son, Caleb. To Vanessa and Dr. Thorne, Caleb was just a quiet wine geek, a master oenologist who spent his days in the laboratory testing the chemical acidity of grapes. They thought they had committed the perfect, untraceable murder. But as they prepared to inherit a $2 billion wine empire, Caleb steps into the private tasting room. He hasn't brought a lawyer. He has brought an empty glass decanter, a bottle of cologne, and a terrifying truth. Vanessa and Dr. Thorne thought they could use science to cover their tracks, but Caleb is about to show them that chemistry leaves a stain that never washes out. The story begins 6 months before the fatal anniversary. Harrison Vance was a titan of the wine industry, but his health was slowly declining. He suffered from mild joint pain and occasional shortness of breath, nothing fatal, but enough to require the constant presence of his live-in physician, Dr. Thorne. What Harrison didn't know was that Dr. Thorne was attending to more than just his medical needs. Behind the locked doors of the guest house, Dr. Thorne and Harrison's young wife, Vanessa, were planning their future. They were deeply in love with each other, but even more in love with Harrison's $2 billion estate. However, Harrison had an ironclad prenuptial agreement. If Vanessa divorced him, she would walk away with almost nothing. The only way she could get the vineyards, the money, and the power was if she became a widow. But Harrison was tough, and he was heavily guarded. A gunshot, a pushed balcony, or traditional poison like arsenic would instantly trigger a homicide investigation. They needed a weapon that would vanish into thin air, a weapon that wouldn't show up on any toxicology report. They needed an assassination that looked exactly like nature taking its course. Dr. Thorne was a brilliant, albeit twisted, medical mind. He knew that the human body is essentially a walking chemical reactor. He devised a plan that relied on binary toxicology, using two separate, entirely harmless substances that only become lethal when they mix. On the morning of the Grand Anniversary Festival, Dr. Thorne handed Harrison his daily medication. Among the pills was a new, experimental joint and mobility supplement. It contained a specific sulfur-based enzyme. It was completely legal, non-toxic, and safe to swallow. Once ingested, the enzyme safely circulated in Harrison's blood and would naturally be excreted through his sweat pores. An hour later, Vanessa walked into Harrison's study. She handed him a beautifully wrapped anniversary gift. It was a bespoke, custom-made cologne imported from a private boutique in Europe. "I had this scent designed just for you, Harrison," Vanessa told him, kissing his cheek. "It has notes of Tuscan leather and bitter almond. Please wear it today. I want you to smell unforgettable for the guests." Harrison smiled, completely oblivious to the trap. He took the pill. He sprayed the heavy cologne onto his neck and the collar of his linen shirt. The two harmless halves of the weapon were now in place. All they needed was a spark, and the hot California sun was about to provide it. The anniversary festival was a masterpiece of luxury. Hundreds of wealthy guests gathered under the open sky of the vineyard. The temperature soared to 95 degrees. Harrison was in high spirits, giving a passionate speech to the crowd, walking among the vines with a glass of champagne in his hand. As the heat of the midday sun beat down on him, Harrison began to sweat. That was the trigger. The harmless sulfur enzyme from the doctor's pill seeped out of his pores. It soaked into the collar of his linen shirt, right where Vanessa's custom cologne had been sprayed. The moment the sweat met the organic aldehyde base of the cologne, a violent chemical reaction occurred. Right under Harrison's nose, the two liquids fused, instantly vaporizing into a dense, invisible cloud of toxic, paralyzing gas. Harrison stopped mid-sentence. He dropped his champagne glass. He grabbed his throat, his eyes wide with absolute panic. He couldn't breathe. The invisible vapor paralyzed his airway in seconds. He collapsed onto the hot dirt, violently gasping for oxygen that his lungs could no longer process. Dr. Thorne rushed through the screaming crowd, playing the hero. He performed CPR, but he knew it was useless. Within 3 minutes, Harrison was dead. The vapor quickly dissipated into the hot summer air, leaving no trace in Harrison's blood. The coroner ruled it a tragic acute bronchial spasm. The perfect murder was complete. A week passed. The funeral was over and the estate was quiet. Caleb, the estranged son, arrived at the mansion to collect a few of his father's personal belongings. Caleb didn't care about the billions. He only wanted his father's old wine-tasting journal. But as Caleb was packing the belongings, he picked up the unwashed linen shirt his father had worn on the day he died. Caleb was a master wine chemist. His nose was trained to detect microscopic chemical imbalances in a liquid just by smelling a cork. As he held the shirt, he noticed something impossible. The collar smelled like Tuscan leather, yes, but beneath it there was a sharp, acrid scent. It smelled like burnt almonds and oxidized copper. It was an acidic signature that absolutely did not belong in a luxury fragrance. Caleb took the linen shirt and the half-empty bottle of Vanessa's custom cologne straight to his high-tech wine laboratory in the cellar. He locked the door and didn't come out for 2 days. He placed the fabric in a gas chromatography machine. He pulled his father's medical records from the estate's server. When the computer finalized the molecular breakdown, Caleb's blood ran completely cold. He stared at the screen, realizing the horrifying brilliance of his stepmother and the doctor. The next afternoon, Vanessa and Dr. Thorne were sitting in the estate's private glass-walled tasting room. They were drinking a $10,000 bottle of vintage red wine, celebrating with their corporate lawyers. They were minutes away from signing the documents that would officially transfer the entire $2 billion empire into their names. The heavy oak doors swung open. Caleb walked in. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He was carrying an empty crystal wine decanter, the bottle of custom cologne, and his father's unwashed linen shirt inside a plastic evidence bag. Vanessa rolled her eyes, setting her wine glass down. "Caleb, please. We are in the middle of finalizing the estate. I know you're grieving, but the coroner's report is final. Your father had an asthma attack." Dr. Thorne nodded solemnly. "Caleb, as a medical professional, I assure you, it was a tragedy of nature. His heart and lungs simply gave out under the heat." Caleb didn't look at them. He put on a pair of black, chemical-resistant nitrile gloves. "You're right, doctor. It was a tragedy of nature," Caleb said, his voice quiet but echoing off the glass walls. "But it wasn't human biology. It was organic chemistry, a binary asphyxiant." Vanessa's confident smile faltered. Dr. Thorne's hand gripped his wine glass a little too tightly. "You thought you were untouchable because you didn't use a knife or a traditional poison," Caleb explained, looking directly at the lawyers who were now sitting in stunned silence. "You used a binary compound. Dr. Thorne's pill provided the catalyst in my father's sweat. Vanessa's perfume provided the fuel, harmless apart, lethal together." "That is an outrageous psychotic accusation," Dr. Thorne yelled, standing up. "You have absolutely no proof of this science fiction." "Actually, doctor," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I have the science right here." Caleb pulled the piece of his father's linen collar out of the evidence bag. He dropped it into the large, empty crystal wine decanter. "I extracted the crystallized sweat from my father's collar using a centrifuge," Caleb explained. "It still contains the heavy sulfur enzyme you prescribed, doctor. Now, let me show you what happens when Vanessa's gift of love touches it." Caleb picked up the bespoke cologne. He reached his gloved hand over the top of the crystal decanter and sprayed 2 mists of the perfume directly onto the fabric inside. He immediately placed a heavy glass stopper over the top to seal it. Instantly, the air inside the crystal decanter began to change. The 2 chemicals violently reacted. A thick, swirling, pale yellow mist rapidly formed inside the glass, filling the decanter with a heavy, toxic cloud. The lawyers gasped, pushing their chairs away from the table in sheer horror. "That," Caleb said, pointing to the swirling yellow vapor trapped in the glass. Is a concentrated respiratory paralyzer. It suffocated him in open air in less than 90 seconds. And because it evaporated as a gas, the coroner found nothing in his blood. Vanessa's face turned the color of ash. She couldn't speak. She looked at Dr. Thorne, whose medical arrogance had completely collapsed into sheer terror. "You left a chemical footprint, doctor," Caleb said, pulling a thick file from his jacket and dropping it on the table. "I also tracked the offshore wire transfer. You paid a black market chemist in Europe to formulate this exact cologne to react with your pills. You didn't just commit murder. You left an electronic trail." Outside the glass walls of the tasting room, 3 police cruisers quietly pulled up to the estate. 6 homicide detectives walked out, armed with the forensic data Caleb had already submitted to the district attorney. As the police entered the room with handcuffs, Vanessa broke down sobbing, her $2 billion dream completely shattered. Dr. Thorne tried to run, but the detective slammed him against the mahogany tasting table. Caleb packed up his crystal decanter, carefully sealing it in a hazardous materials container. He looked at the 2 people who had destroyed his family for money. "You thought because you used chemistry, you were invisible," Caleb said softly as Vanessa was handcuffed. "But you forgot the most basic rule of a laboratory. Every reaction leaves a residue. You can't erase science. In a world that is obsessed with getting away with it, perfect crimes, and using intelligence for greed, we often forget that the truth is woven into the very fabric of nature." Vanessa and Dr. Thorne thought they could use brilliant science to mask their darkest desires. They thought the world would only see the tragedy and never question the toxins. But Caleb taught us a different lesson. You can fake a tear, but you can never fake forensic evidence. You can manipulate a heart, but you can't outsmart the undeniable laws of chemistry. Vanessa and Julian chose wealth over humanity, and their perfect plan evaporated into thin air, leaving only the toxic residue of their guilt behind. Remember, a lie might be invisible for a moment, but under the right lens, the truth always becomes crystal clear. Never underestimate the quiet professionals who pay attention to the smallest details, because when the smoke clears, logic and justice will always have the final word. If this story reminded you that the truth is the most powerful element of all, type justice in the comments and share this to honor the brilliant minds who fight for the light.